What makes a man devote his days and nights and weekends to January Blitz! Greetings, friends and interwebbians. Welcome to Frame 24. So this video was supposed to go up January 31st. Sorry about the delay. There's been a real nasty cold virus going around with flu-like symptoms, and that had me laid out most of the month of January. And I couldn't record anything until my breathing and my voice were back to normal. Sorry the video is so late. Last year, I managed to watch 88 movies. That's maybe not super impressive from like a film critic standpoint, but it's more than I've ever managed. Of those 88 movies, I picked 24 that I thought were most deserving of rewatching. I spent January rewatching those movies. What follows is a series of reviews for each of those movies. The challenge was to review each one in 24 seconds or less. Whether I succeeded or not, I guess you'll have to watch and find out. This is an uneven film with some brilliant moments. Unfortunately, it really highlights the budgetary restrictions that Orson Welles was forced to work with operating outside the studio system. At the same time, this is a fascinating little nesting doll of a narrative with twists and turns that you're not going to see coming. Well worth a watch if you haven't seen it. One of John Ford's most personal projects, this comedic romp through the Irish countryside proves that John Wayne could have been a comedian if he'd wanted to. Now, his climactic confrontation with co-star Maureen O'Hara might be a bit much for today's audience's sensibilities. At the same time, the ensuing brawl with Victor McLaglen, easily one of the best fistfights ever put onto celluloid. Three amazing montages really make this movie for me. The opening where we meet our hero and our villain, the tennis match, which almost makes me care about tennis, and the climactic carousel fight, which frankly I think really should unseat Psycho as Hitchcock's masterpiece of editing. John Ford at his absolute peak. Great cinematography, brilliant performances. My personal favorite is Donald Crisp, who delivers a masterclass in understated acting. This film won Best Picture at the 1941 Oscars, notoriously beating out Citizen Kane. Now, is it a better film than Citizen Kane? Probably not. Does it deserve most of the accolades it's gotten over the decades? You bet your... I will admit, this one doesn't wow me as much as Citizen Kane does, but it's a similar story idea taken to the extreme. Yes, we have conflicting stories, but in this case, they literally can't all be true. It's a wonderful intellectual exercise, and then, of course, Takashi Shimura gets me every time. I cry at the end of the movie. He's such a good actor, the son of a bitch. An almost hallucinatory meditation on art and truth and fraud and the meaning of those terms, a series of interlocking stories that double back on each other and twist around in a kaleidoscopic video essay that, frankly, sets the standard for what this form can be. This is not a perfect film by any means, but at the same time, I love it. I mean, you guys know, I've already reviewed it on my channel. It's sweet, it's funny, it's got these great performances, and it just inspires me. I see this film, I want to go and make stuff. I want to do things. I mean, what else is there to say? It's Brigsby Bear! Meticulously crafted, so creepy, so funny, so damn British. This is possibly my favorite zombie movie. Just every time I watch it, there are more and more details that really jump out at me. That to me is the mark of a well-made film. God, I love this movie. Gay. a devastating and very real portrait of a relationship. Fantastic performances by the two leads, great handheld cinematography, wonderful makeup effects, particularly towards the end. This is a small film that really deserves more attention than it's gotten. I love it. It scared the hell out of me. It got under my skin and wouldn't let go. Just a fun time. This is the quintessential Western. A handful of really nice shots, but just a joy to sit through. Thomas Mitchell as Doc Boone is just fantastic. He won a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for his portrayal here, rightly so. He's the reason I come back to this movie. So much fun. Um, Great dialogue, thrills, funny when you want it to be funny, just wonderful satire, easily one of the best protagonist antagonist pairings that you will find this side of maybe The Dark Knight. I just love this movie. It's a good time. Artistic cinema at its absolute peak. This is just one of those films where it's so beautiful that it hurts, and yet we don't understand why we feel what we feel. We respond, we experience it, but objective, verifiable meaning is just beyond our reach. The most expensive indie film ever made and worth every penny. We follow a handful of actors in a crazy number of roles through a kaleidoscope of time and space and tragedy and hilarity and thrilling adventure, an uplifting testament to the human spirit, and need I say, Hugh Grant in full-on cannibal face paint. Kurosawa's amazing samurai epic. It's so good, but so long. I recommend hitting the pause button when you get to the intermission. Take a walk, take a nap, something. Come back, be refreshed, be ready for the second half, and you will not be disappointed. Toshiro Mifune gives a career-defining performance as Kakushio, the wannabe samurai. God, it's just so good. Beautiful cinematography, and they did a really good job of making this weird love story seem sweet, not uncomfortable, not creepy. The ending of the film will keep you asking, did this really happen, or is this part just a fairy tale? Is this part a metaphor? This won Best Picture at the Oscars for a reason. To be honest, I was a little concerned as to how the scares and the tension would really translate on the smaller screen. There were some important, finer details that got a little bit lost in the translation, but the tension, the scares, the uncomfortable family dynamic is all still there. It still got under my skin. Hereditary, you gorgeous bastard. I love you. You scared the shit out of me. Only thing I have to say beyond that is now, what we got here is failure to communicate. Paul Newman at the top of his game, George Kennedy in an Oscar winning supporting role, the fantastic camera work of Conrad Hall. This is a beautiful celebration of the individual spirit and resilience in the face of oppression. One of the best movies ever made. Enough said. Personally, I think the greatest romantic comedy ever written. The story of two imperfect, likable people who need to get the hell out of their own way so they can be happy. I mean, even their faults come across as endearing because we understand them and we know why they've built up these coping mechanisms. But at the same time, guys, it's time to let that shit go. Hitchcock's pure cinema aesthetic at its absolute best. Brilliant use of Kuleshov at its visual storytelling, great funny dialogue. My favorite part about this film is the way it builds two competing stories of what's going on, one told through dialogue, one told through the visuals. You can probably guess which one wins out. Seven people with seven stories collide on the California-Nevada border in Drew Goddard's sophomore effort. A lot of people, when this came out, were describing it as a bad Tarantino impression. There is so much more going on in this movie, guys. Stellar set design, great performances all the way around. If you didn't see this in 2018, be sure to see it in 2019. Easily the greatest love story ever put to celluloid, and one of classic Hollywood's greatest films, with the noirish lighting, the snappy dialogue, Max Steiner's beautiful score, the iconic La Marseillaise sequence. I mean, this is an absolute masterpiece, a celebration of the human spirit made during our darkest hour. One glorious mindfuck of a movie. Bruce Willis in one of his best and most complex roles in a story that twists and turns and doubles back on itself. Brilliant use of Dutch angles, wide-angle lenses, shaky handheld camera to show the collapsing mental states. Really just a beautiful, complicated movie that I love very dearly. There's a reason Citizen Kane gets the reputation as being the greatest film ever made. Just on a technical perspective, what Wells was able to do with the long continuous takes, the deep focused lenses, the light, the shadow, the transitions between scenes and shots. Every time I see this movie, there's some other aspect of the genius that pops out at me. Go watch this if you haven't seen it. Really, what's your excuse? John Ford's masterpiece, one of the greatest westerns ever made, one of John Wayne's greatest performances. With Monument Valley as the incredible backdrop, Ford weaves an elliptical narrative starring one of his most complex and enigmatic lead characters. This is just one of the most perfect films ever made. This might even be my favorite movie. Anyway, guys, I hope you liked that video. If you did, please leave a like. Consider subscribing to Frame 24. What were some of the best films you watched last year? Anyway, I hope you had a better January than I did. I hope February's treating you well, and I'll see you guys on the flip side.